Today we will start our lesson number 2 of Python programming. Before we do any type of programming, we have to learn what is a variable, what are the different types of variable, and how do we name a variable in Python, okay? And then we will do one or two example programs. As we progress further, we will do more programming, but here let's talk about different type of variable that you can use in Python. Now, you can think about, first let's talk about the numbers, and we can talk about two types of numbers. So when we talk about the numbers, we can talk about two types of numbers. One could be the integer numbers, or one other would be the float. So when we talk about numbers, we have integers and float. Now integers are used to count the type of things that cannot be divided into portions. For example, if I ask you how many chairs are in the room, you will always reply me 4 or 5 or 3 or 4. You would never say 3.5 or 4.6. If I say how many quarters do you have, then you will say that I have 4 quarters. You would not say I have 2.5 quarters, right? Float, on the other hand, represent the number that can have a fractional part. For example, if I ask you how long is this thread, so you can say it is 3.45 meters long, right? Or if I ask you how much money do you have, then you can say I have $1.45. That means $1.45. Percentages and other things are used as represented. They are numbers, right? But they are represented as float. Computers store these two types of numbers totally separately and using a different type of notation. If you are interested how computers store these numbers, I will post a link in the description about a video where I have discussed the difference between integer and the floating point numbers. Now, a string is also a data type that is used to represent names and addresses and other things. Actually, it is a set of characters and things that normally we don't do any type of addition, multiplication, those type of operations on strings. So, for example, if I say what is your name, we want to use a string data type so that the computer knows that this type of data would not be multiplied or divided. Boolean, sometimes we only want to know a yes or no, or a true or false, this kind of situation, this kind of answer. So we use Boolean type of data type on there. And characters are single letters. So enter yes, enter Y for yes, enter N for no. So when we say a variable, what is a variable? A variable is a nickname for a place in the RAM, or random access memory of the computer. So when we write a program, those instructions are actually loaded into computer's memory. Now, computer memory can be think of as a bunch of shelves, and each shelf has a number. Now, every time we load our program, it kind of is given a different place in that memory, right? We cannot always demand the same place number. So whatever is given, we store that reference into the variable of either type integer or float or strings or boolean or character or any type of things that we are doing. So now let's write there are some rules that we should follow when we write the code or program in Python. So those rules are as follows. So there are some of the rules that we should remember while naming our variables. First of all, we cannot start a variable name with a number or a special character, but we can use the underscore to start the variable name. So underscore ABC would be a valid variable name, but asterisk ABC would not be a variable name. We cannot start with a number, but we can have a number in the name, but not as the first character. So num1 is a valid name, but one num is not a correct name. So a variable name must represent the value it is storing. So you cannot, so for example, you want to store number of students in a variable, but don't call it chairs, right? Or don't call it just A. It's ambiguous, so make sure that when you name your variable, you use the proper naming. There must be no space in a variable name, so you cannot have cat space number or cat space house length. You cannot use that. Must not be the keywords. Oh, that should be the keywords in Python. I accidentally typed. So they should not be the keywords. For example, you cannot use print as a name, and then as we move forward, we will see different type of variable names in there. Do understand that variable names are case sensitive. So let's take a little quiz, and you guys tell me whether you have figure that out and whether we have the correct variable names or not, and you identify whether these are correct or not. Okay, so let's do a little quiz. So let's start with, is the first name is a valid name? It is not a valid name because we have a number in front of as the first letter. We cannot have this. Okay, so this is wrong. Let me get up some, so cross it out. So this is not correct, right? So this is not a correct thing. So with the other one, if you come out num1, this is a valid name. Why? Because we do have a number in there, but the number is not the first letter, right? And there are no spaces in there, and num1 is not a keyword in Python. Now come up to the third variable name, @num. It's wrong because we are using a special character. A special character is not allowed except for the underscore. We cannot use any special character anywhere. So it doesn't matter whether it's the first character or it's the middle character or the end character. Special characters are not allowed, except we can only use the underscore. Now take a look at the fourth one, num space cat. No, that is not allowed because these are two different verbs. It's not a single word. There are two words, so either num is a variable or cat is a variable, but together they don't represent a variable because that's not one word. These are two words, so these are not variable names. Now if you look at the last one with capital letter num and then we have an underscore in there, let me remove that. So you can see that there is an underscore in the name. That is correct. We can have two, if you want to correct two words using an underscore, that's okay. Now as you can see here, underscore as the first character, that is also allowed. Okay, so these are some of the rules that we should use while naming our variables. So let's do a little program in which we ask the user how many apples did they buy and how much does each apple cost, and then we will calculate their total amount of money that they owe to make the customer. So we will print that to pay the shopkeeper. Okay, so let's write this little program using our IDLE. If you all have remembered, we have installed IDLE in the last program. So look for Python programming 1 lesson. These are the numbering of the lesson is in order of as you must progress if you are following this course. Okay, so let me bring up in the start menu, I'm going to do IDLE, and it's going to open me the Python IDLE, and I have it open. And in here what I will do is I will press the file. I'm opening a new file, and inside that file I'm going to write, as I always say, it's always a good practice to start writing a starting comment, and I will write Professor A, so who is the author, some kind of like something, and then usually I will write a little description. So it is my first program, so that when we visit back we know what we were doing in our programs. Okay, so first of thing I will say is I will ask for the number of apples. So a number of when we buy apples, we buy the whole apples. That means that should be an integer type of number, right? So what do we call it? Let's call it num apples. Okay, so that is the correct variable name because I just use the underscore, although I use two words, but they're connecting using the underscore, and I say I want to get an integer. That's okay, I want to get an integer, but where do I want to get it? I want to get it from the input. So if I don't put it that it is an integer, and inside the input I'm going to put the prompt, please enter the number of apples that you bought, right? So I'm going to put that message for the user, and I'm going to close my quotes. So if you take a look at that, I have this message, please enter the number of apples that you bought. And what I did was this action will connect my keyboard. Not all of it is visible here, but let me come in here. So this action will ask the keyboard to read whatever I'm typing on the screen, and then as I'm typing on the screen, the keyboard is typing on the keyboard. The keyboard just sent the number representation or the wire combination that I have entered, but I want to read it as an integer. Okay, so I put that whole thing, take this whole thing and make it an integer. Now what I want to do is I want to now enter the number of how many did we buy from what is the price of each apple. So let's come in here and I say let's say price, right? That's a very good name for the price of an apple. And then I say I want to have a float. And where is that float come from? It is going to come from the input. And I say from the input, and I'm going to then type the prompt in there. Okay, so it should be a quotation, and I say please enter, sorry, let me write it down. Enter the price of one apple, right? Then we ask the user to enter the price of one apple. Now that will give me the price of one apple. So you guys can see that I have opened closing one extra. So make sure as many parentheses you open, you must be closing at the end as many, right? Make sure that for every opening brace you have a closing parentheses in there. So let's calculate the total price. So I will say total is equal to we have to get whatever is the user has provided number of apples, because these are our placeholders, multiplied by, for multiplication we use the asterisk symbol. That is the shift at the 8 key. Asterisk is the multiplication symbol. We don't use the X because X is a character, right? So that becomes a text character, so we don't use that. Asterisk is used for that, and we just say we will multiply the price of one apple by the number of apples, and that will give us the total. Now we are ready to give the output to the user. And how do we provide the output? We use that the print statement. So we will say we are going to print out our output, and in the output first I want to put some message that okay, the total price is, and then I put the dollar symbol because I want to print it in dollars, right? Now I want to say I don't want to print the word total, but I want to print its value. So that case I will just say connect the, let's go to that memory location and retrieve the value that it's storing in there as a calculation. Now when we want to print as it is, we want to put that inside the quotation mark, and we want to just print the value that this variable is holding, not name. So we will just use the name of the variable without the quotation. And how do we combine this? So we are trying to construct a sentence by using what we are saying and by retrieving the value of the total from the from our variable. Now sometime what students do is that they put the dollar symbols and other thing. Computer don't really care. For this it is just numbers. If you think in your program it is a dollar, then you put the dollar sign in there. Otherwise you not put the dollar sign. But we don't put the dollar sign in price because then it is not a number anymore, it's something else. Okay, so let's go ahead and let's save it and run it. So I'm going to save it into my Python programs, and I'm going to just call it test4. You can call it something else, but make sure you have chosen the Python files in here. Otherwise, Python compiler or Python interpreter would not be able to recognize. And then we save it. Okay. So as soon as we save it, it's ready to run. But what I have done is that I have pressed the run button and it's saved and run it. So it's asking me enter the number of apples that you bought. Let's say I bought 5 apples. Enter the price of one apple. Let's say one apple was $1.25 and my total price is $6.25, right? So let me close this and go back here. What I have done is I have gone here in the run. When you press the run module, if you haven't saved your file, it will first ask you to save, and then it will run for you. So I'm asking the number of apple. Let's say this time I bought 3 apple, and one apple was, because they might be on sale with 86 cents, right? And that would be $2.58. So what we have learned is that we have learned the data type of integer, and we were taking the input from the user, but we are telling our program what type of input that we expect, and we were telling our program what type of input we expect here for different type of numbers that we are trying to get. To understand, we don't put any dollar sign or anything in there because computer do not care. For computer a number is a number, right? Whether it's a money or number of apples or whatever that is, it needs a computer is a very obedient servant. is only as smart as the person who is using that. Okay, I hope you play around with that and write your own little programs. So maybe you might want to write down programs that requires the input of integers and float and calculations, and then you print out the value in there. We will continue with our third lecture, extending on this knowledge. And again, we don't expect any kind of previous behavior or previous knowledge, sorry, from you all. So try the lesson number 1 and then lesson number 2 and use that in that order. And let me know if I can do something special that you might want to do. Thank you.